I hope you know how to build a city, for in this Roll for Crit review, we're going to be taking a look at the board game Founders of Teotihuacan. Founders of Teotihuacan was designed by Philip Glowacz and published by Board&Dice. It is a combination of a tile placement and worker placement game, in which you are all playing as competing architects trying to prove you've got the best city plan. You'll do so by creating resources, building temples, and of course the central pyramid, and whoever does so by of course gaining victory points will be crowned the master architect. This game takes place over multiple rounds in which you will place one or more of your action discs on the available spots down here. To actually explain how the actions work, let's break down the action board. The board is broken into 3 rows and 3 columns. The top row is for building actions, while the bottom row is for influence actions. This middle one here is where you'll be placing your action discs and dictating which column you are triggering. Now, before we go into each column, we're actually going to explain a bit more about the details of how building actions work versus influence. Building actions will have you build usually one kind of tile onto your map board here. There are unfortunately though some restrictions. First off, you can only build where your architect sees. You'll have this meeple here that's going to move around the board at the end of each turn, going to the next spot. If he's standing up here, then you can only build here and here, in essence, the side that they are on. You will not be able to build on the far side of the board, nor any of the far side of the pyramids. The next thing involving building is the strength of actions. You see, when you place action discs, you can place multiple, whether it be one or more. When you place one here, for example, this has a total strength of 2. 1 for the disc on it, plus any other disc below. So in this case, there's just the starting bonus token. But if you were to say place here, that would be a strength of 4, much stronger. The strength action will dictate how much you can or cannot build, or at the very least, how much you need to pay. The bottom row is the influence actions. When you take an influence action, it doesn't matter how strong your action is, you're just going to do exactly what it says down there. Finally, I want to go over those bonus tokens for if you see these images here. If you're the first to place there, you're actually going to get a bonus. So in this case, you would get an additional build action to the one you decide either the influence or build you'd already get from placing there. Keep in mind, you can choose the order as well, and it's only first come, first serve. So the next person who places there won't also get a build action. That is to reward players from getting there first, because like I said, afterwards people can place on top and get a stronger action depending on how many tokens are already there. Let's go over the first column now. Now, the build action here is to build one of these resource buildings. They do not cost anything to build. However, you are limited by the strength of your action. So if your strength is only 2, you can only build the 2 covering buildings. Strength of 3, you can build the buildings that cover 3 spots. So once you make your choice, you're going to take a building and place it on your board. You're then going to take matching resources and place it adjacent in empty spaces, that is, to the building you just built. Do keep in mind that A, if you were to build it next to the wall, you would not get those resources. And B, there are limited quantities each round. It is refilled at the start of each round. So if that's gone, well, you can't build it. The bottom action gives you a choice. You can either A, have each of your resource buildings produce 1 cube of the resource, gold, wood, or stone. Or option B, you can build 2 single-size buildings. These will come from the supply, not from the board, so that is unlimited, so to speak, and place on your board. This is a good way to maybe, if you need some stone very quickly, or for example, you want to cover up these masks. That's the thing I forgot to mention right now. When you're building, you may notice these mask spots. Regardless of whether it's a temple or the resource buildings, if you are able to fully cover up a mask spot, you're going to get the top mask piece in that pile over there, which will change based on player count. Higher up it is, or earlier you get the mask, the more points it'll be worth. So those can run out, so keep that in mind when building. Next up, let's actually move to the second column where I just took a green temple from. These are your temples. Now, the top build action is to build a temple. There'll always be 2 available at the start of each round. There is green, blue, and red. Now, the strength, regardless of your strength, technically you can build any of them. However, for the value of your strength, for each number, it's below the size of it. So for example, if you have a strength of only 3 and you want to build a red temple, which is 5, you need to pay this extra cost down here. So if you have a strength of 3, like I said before, it costs you a stone, a gold, and 2 more stone. Same thing as here, they have their own value costs, so keep that in mind in what you want to build. Once you place it, keep in mind that unlike the brown building I placed before, that you are trying to place wherever your architect can see. You cannot place on other tiles, but you can place over other cubes. That is not a problem. If you build a temple as well, you're going to get one of these bonus tiles. This should have been face up, and you can choose either one of the two face up in the color you built. So since we built a red, we could choose either this one and this one. These are worship tiles, and they'll come into play when we actually look at the influence action. Some of these, you may notice, just may give you a straight reward, such as 3 points and a free influence action, while some of the other ones may have specific requirements. This requires you to have at least 3 blue buildings before you gain 3 points, or like this, you may actually have to spend resources to get the reward. Usually victory points, but as you can see, some of these also reward buildings. The final column will have you building up the central pyramid. You may notice the pyramid tiles conveniently match temple colors. When you choose a pyramid tile to build, so let's go with this one, you can place it anywhere your architect can see the entire tile. So we'll place it right there. If you place it on the first floor, you're going to get the bonus you cover. So in this case, if I cover that, that would give me a free green tile. That's pretty nice. You can also place it if you have all support on top of those tiles, such as though. If you continue building, of course, you will be able to place one more tile on top. That's technically illegal, but you get the idea. You can build a nice, cute little pyramid. The reason you're going to want to build up pyramid spaces is 1, building one gives you 2 points, and 2, at the end of the game, you're going to score each sector, and when you score sectors, each tile on the ground floor is going to earn 2 points for each temple matching its color in that sector. There are little border lines that you can build across sometimes, usually when the architect can see both zones. So for example, this blue tile will earn 2 points for seeing just one blue temple, but if you had more sitting around there, you'd get even more points as I try to finagle these in. Now, if it's higher up, it will actually score you 3 points, meaning you're going to get even more points if you're able to really stack up a quarter with a specific temple color and pyramid tiles. But let's go back to that action strength I was mentioning before. These are considered to all be 4 shape regardless of the color. So just like the temples, for each one you're below 4, you have to pay an extra gold to the 2 golden wood, which is very expensive. Finally, we've got the influence action on the bottom. What this does will have you move your disc up, score that many points, and you get to take one of your worship tiles, putting it back in the pile. I'm just going to put it back here for now and go on the bottom. And you get to swap it for another one regardless of color. So if you really wanted maybe a different color one or didn't like one of the ones you have, that is a great action for you. Of course, don't forget at the end of each of your turns that architect moves over 1 space clockwise. You're going to continue this for multiple rounds until people have placed all their workers and you have gone through the rounds where this has met up, and then you'll calculate points. Rounds reset with a similar number of buildings and also temples depending on player count. So there's technically a limited amount that can be built each round, but whether it's from the temple bonuses or from the worship tiles, those are pulled from supply, so you don't have to worry too much about triggering one of those when someone has already built up the kind of building that you're looking for. The game itself, I think, does a really clever thing for both the worker placement and tile placement. We've seen city tile planning and building before, and oftentimes when I play those games, I'm pretty good at them because they have they want a Tetris-like effect, putting everything tightly together in this very just nicely fitting package. This game is not so much that for the most part. When you place the tiles, you're making decisions on A, should I try to cover up these masks really quick, which do give a lot of points as you can see down here. But if you look at the resource tiles, which of course you're gonna need to build all the things that give you lots of points, you want them to have a lot of empty spaces about it. If I were to place this single tile here, for example, yes, that gives me a mask, but it's not giving me any resources. That means you're going to decide, do I want to cover this up or put this down there where I'm going to maximize my resource generation count? This made for much more interesting odd maps with most tight fitting being in the quarter that people tried to go like, I'm going to put all my blue temples here, so I'm going to try the best fitting blue temples. Same thing going for green and red. The other thing, of course, is the worker placement. If you look at the workers, first of all, your action discs, which are your workers, and you don't have to put one. You could hypothetically put, if you wanted to get a strength 4 one right off the bat, you could do that, but you're giving up a lot of turns in response. Oftentimes, you're going to want to either A, try to get that bonus because placing it there gives you, in essence, a free action, or B, you're going to wait until someone has built these towers up so you can be the one to place on top. Do keep in mind, I should have mentioned this, once you have 3 action tokens, so a strength of 4 has been triggered there, no more can be placed on there. This is going to be seen more in the 4 and 2-player games, because in the 2-player version, you lose one of these spots. And in the 4-player game, you're probably going to see, of course, more of those spots being taken up because that's the higher player count. Both of these innovations are really good. I think they add some different changes and some strategic choices that are going to come along that will be helpful to those who maybe are well versed in those game styles. Tile placement, it's a game style I love. I love the things that have you building things up, but because I couldn't just obviously crush everything together, I had to think a bit more like, oh, do I place this here? This will cover up more mass, but I'm only generating 1 resource, and I chose that because I really need a lot more stone because I'm going all in on blue temples. It made for a much more interesting city layout, so to speak, to see how people would place things, and are they actually going to go for that mass? Because maybe they're not going to go for it, so maybe you do have that extra turn to mess around with something because they won't take that 9 points before you. It all depends, and of course, this architect. God, I forgot about him. And that's actually a big problem in this game. When you move him around, you can only build in certain areas. And first off, so many times do people forget about that. They're like, wait, I'm like, wait, you can't build there. What do you mean you can't? Oh, right, I got to move my architect. Or like, how'd you build there? Oh, my architect was there. Oh, wait, I need to. And then there's a lot of backtracking. It can be a little bit annoying. I like the concept and the idea of the restriction to the board. Otherwise, you can probably just build wherever you want pretty easy and wouldn't be too much of a challenge. But it was a bit of a pain and slowed down the game a little bit. The architect is that depending on how you built your city, because he goes around the board, if you're just because what happened, you focus a bit more on the top part of the board. I noticed players then would be like, I really don't care as much. When he's on the bottom, I don't have a turn. I don't care. I'm really choosing maybe it's not even, I guess it's not optimal ability. It just feels like you don't have as many actions. That becomes really bad in the final round of the game because each round you actually lose an action disc. We've seen this plenty of times before. One of my favorite games, Wingspan, does that. But in Wingspan, where you're building an engine, so each action does more, in this, it feels like you're very limited in that final round, and felt that third round was more cleanup phase because you had so little to do. They weren't stronger actions than what you had before. In fact, they could arguably be weaker because your board might already be filled in such a way with your architect over here that doesn't matter too much. But up until then, I had a blast actually building to that point. Now, the other thing I do want to focus on a lot is the single player mode. The way the single player mode works is it gets this die that is only used in single player setup. You're going to roll the die 3 times and correspond to a chart here, which is going to add some extra rules on things for example, you could not use the free trade 2 gold for a resource. Or if you want to win, you have to completely build your pyramid. It changes the game up in such a way that you can't rely on the strategies that you maybe have gotten used to by playing the multiplayer game. And because of that, with the tiling experience, I really, really loved the single player mode. Each game was a little bit different. I couldn't rely on the same strategies. The way that the NPC it restricts your choices, but depending on how it's drawn, it can be very interesting how you can use it in your advantage. And I just feel like I always had a blast playing there. Crits and misses for Founders of Teotihuacan. Crits. The game reinvents both the worker placement mechanic as well as tile placement. I was surprised on how it forced me out of my usual clumping strategy in tile placements, as well as forcing me to make some more interesting decisions in not only how or where I place my workers, but how many. I had a blast in the single player version of this game. Many times having a single player mode I feel is something that is just thrown in there just so it can say 1 to X players. In this case, it is worthy of the critical slot and something you should consider if that's something you look for in a game. Misses. The architect rule is a little bit annoying. It can be one that we felt was often missed no matter how many times people played it, myself included, and it could slow down the game a bit because you're trying to remember if you actually move the architect or not. Another small thing, but more of, I think, nature of the beast, there are some times when, depending on where the architect is, you can feel like you can't really do much there because that's not where you invested, so it's a wasted turn. At the beginning of the game, you're going to start with plenty of action discs, but at the end of each round, you're going to lose one. Come to the final round, you won't actually have many action discs to deal with. And what I noticed was this caused people to not really care too much in that final round. It seems that for the most part, this wasn't when you're going to do your final make or break strategy, but rather some final little bit of cleanup because you didn't have enough actions to really push through and do something really clever or amazing. Or on the other side, if people have already covered the specific bonus action tiles that you may want, there wasn't much else for you to do. And that is, of course, only hampered by the architect, who, of course, if he's not in a position you like, then you can feel like you lost a whole action disc because there's nothing for you to build there. There is a lot this game has to offer. It takes really clever new takes on tile placement and the worker placement, but my two misses are, one is just an annoying rule that is going to be something that you can miss and look over, so you'll have to keep an eye on. The other one is the action disc thing, and I think this may have to go a little bit with just my own personality. I think this came up a little bit with Legends of Arnak, but when you have less to do, if you're not having stronger actions, to me, it's a little bit boring. You sort of are losing steam in essence. And what I did notice, though, I feel like at the very least with the people I played with, come that third round, what would tend to happen is, one, you've done a lot during the first few rounds. So you've built up a temple. You already decided I build up my blue temple section or my green temple section. And I've already got my resources done. I've got the worship tiles already set up. So maybe you might turn in some of those worship tiles and I guess I'll do this. It feels like the game's already done. You're doing that almost that extra bit of victory points are almost like counting sometimes in some games, like every 5 coins give you 1 point kind of deal. So it almost felt more like a cleanup round rather than an actual like that final round when everyone's sweating bullets and seeing how to get past and defeat their opponents. But, up until then, it's been a blast. Playing with those new mechanics was really fun. Seeing, especially when you have a lot of players, all these discs pile up and trying to open up stronger actions, or being the first and feel like you feel really good because you got a bonus, even if this is cheaper, you're like, oh, but I'm going to get an extra build action. And of course, being like, oh, look, I've got this blue set up perfectly now for blue actions. Obviously, I'd probably move those over here, but you get the idea of it feels very rewarding and the choices are significant and they matter. So I think for the most part, I enjoy the game. It's not that the end phase ruins it. It just feels like something you got to just get through until you see who wins. And that is not enough for me to not want to play this game again. So I love that it forced me to make some difficult decisions. And even though that last round sours me a little bit, it's not enough to make me want to come back for more. In particular, the single player mode for me was just, I loved it. I thought it was really fun that it forced me out with different strategies. I'm sure you don't even need to roll the die if you want to just try out, like, you know what, for now on, I'm going to go with this strat and put this here. I would love to see how other people played this game, what they did for it. And of course, you can let me know what your thoughts on this game. Do you think this does a different take of worker placement and tile placement that really changes up those mechanics? Or am I just silly for finding that third round and the losing of workers, and that's just not something actually that much you have to worry about? You can let me know in those comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe and share this video with someone if you think they'd be interested in this game. But until then, I'm Will, and this has been Roll for Crit.